Excited about Harriet Tubman. You think that you know Harriet Tubman. You know her as a spy, you know her as a scout, but you have not gotten to know Harriet Tubman until you read the book by Dr. Elizabeth Cobbs entitled The Tubman Command. We're excited today because Dr. Cobbs is here with us live. Dr. Cobbs, welcome to Beaufort.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be back.
Oh, we're glad to have you. What inspired you to write a book on Harriet Tubman?
You know, I think it's what you just said. I'm a historian. I've been a historian for almost 30 years. I've written 8 books on American history. And I began to feel like Harriet Tubman was somebody that we all kind of feel like we know, but we think we do, but we don't. And it was funny. It was after the 2016 election. I began to think about how hard it is for a woman to be a leader. And Harriet Tubman and her role in the Underground Railroad, it's always about, her individual kind of daring missions, but she's also kind of on a pedestal, I think, for us all. And so we look at her as this, kind of unknowable person and not a real person. And I think that knowing her as a real person makes her even more remarkable and more heroic.
How did you research the book in South Carolina?
Well, I felt like I had to go there. As I said, I didn't want to just do the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was something that happened over 11 years that she was on it. And it's something, there's many different missions. But in Beaufort, it all kind of happens in this really condensed, concentrated way. And I wanted to write a book that takes place over only a week and a half. And it's the mission that she leads up the Combahee River. And so, of course, I had to go see the Combahee River. And there were parts of it, too, where other historians had written about how maybe even impossible it was that she could have done this. The obstacles were too great and the pluff mud was too deep. And, and she was too different. She was from Maryland. She wasn't Gullah. And all of these things that made me think, well, maybe it is a case of wishful thinking. And I don't want to be a person who, reads backwards from the evidence, goes in with a conclusion and then finds evidence that we cherry pick to fit our assumptions. I really wanted to know, really wanted to reason through in my own mind as a historian how this raid happened or might have happened, how this implausible thing, how this tiny 5-foot nothing woman could lead a group of soldiers, could convince a group of white educated officers from the Northeast to follow her. And so, I had to actually go to Beaufort. I had to walk the streets and I had to go up the Combahee.
And, a lot of people are not aware of the fact that when the federal troops occupied Beaufort in 1861 and the appeal went out to Northerners to come to Beaufort, that Harriet Tubman also came. And a lot of people don't realize that she lived in Beaufort for almost 3 years. So I think it's so important that you chose Beaufort as the setting. And why would you focus more on the Civil War era when others seem to bypass that era and not focus more so on just the Underground Railroad era?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to our inability to imagine, which is one reason to use fiction as I do. It's our inability to imagine a woman as a veteran. I mean, she was a military veteran. She got a military pension. She had to fight for it for 30 years, but she got a pension after the war. And I think, we think war, we think men, right? And that, must be that she went home and hung up her spurs and that was the end of the Underground Railroad. What's so remarkable of the many things that are remarkable about Harriet Tubman is that unlike most abolitionists who once the war started, stayed behind the lines and let the armies do what armies do, which is to fight it out, Harriet Tubman volunteered for the Army, basically. And not only did she respond to that call for Northern missionaries, even more importantly, and this to me is a very important clue about her role, is that she was sent at government expense, that Governor John Andrew of Massachusetts recommended her directly to General David Hunter, who was in charge of forces on the Sea Islands and Department of the South. And that to me is super remarkable, Reverend, because, what government official recommends a specific woman to go south during wartime? And he says to Hunter that she is a very valuable woman. So clearly she had some role, which is much more than, nurse and washerwoman, which is, part of what she did. But I think that that's really more her part of her cover story. Harriet Tubman loved a good cover story. She always had one ready.
Thank you, Doctor. For those of you who are just joining us, we have with us today Dr. Elizabeth Cobbs. She has written a book about Harriet Tubman that focuses on her Civil War endeavors in Beaufort, South Carolina. The book has just been released, and so we have with us today Dr. Cobbs. Dr. Cobbs, I'm a native of this area, and I consider myself to be a Gullah. How did you get the Gullah dialect as accurate as you did?
Well, thank you for that. Boy, that eases my soul. Well, I really wanted, it was an interesting problem. Like when I first wrote the book, books take a while. And my first draft of the book, I didn't want to use dialect. I thought I'll just have everybody sort of speak as people do. And so basically it sounds like somebody in the Midwest reading the weather report. And then I thought, well, that's not respectful to not try to portray people as they might have sounded, because in our heads, we all sound alike, but in speech, it's flavored. And so I had Northerners and tried to get the way they speak correct. I had an immigrant from the area around Scotland, and I had him the way they speak. And so with Harriet Tubman, of course, Harriet herself was from Maryland, so she wasn't Gullah, and that's a kind of upper South kind of sound. The Gullah folk, I found really daunting and so interesting and so inspiring. I used the library right in your hometown. I went there and had some wonderful librarians there, helped me find some of the sources that we have on Gullah. I looked up some books on the subject. There's another wonderful historian named Etta Fields Black, who's writing about the Combahee River Raid right now as a nonfiction book. She's a historian at Carnegie Mellon. And so she gave me some suggestions as well. And, but I didn't go too far in that direction, because I do know that the Gullah, that sometimes the language was so richly tooled, is the way I describe it in the book, that other people couldn't understand it, folks who weren't from the region. And of course, I want my readers to understand what I'm saying. So if I make it too much like Gullah might have sounded, then no one will understand it. But thank you for the compliment. That really means a lot to me. And I did try to insert some Gullah phrases and things that would suggest the unique, character of folks from that area.
One of the unique aspects of Harriet Tubman's role in Beaufort was that she recruited a number of spies who were very familiar with the inland, specifically the plantations up the Combahee River. What did you learn about those unique spies, those scouts that she recruited, and what role did they play in this great raid?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing, Reverend, is that the military records are very sparse and they're very incomplete, and they don't tell anybody's individual story very well. And often when people make a record, they're writing about themselves, so they're not writing about someone else. But so the role of Black Scouts has not really been well documented. But I felt like it had to be there. And by the way, Robert E. Lee himself, writing that same month in May of 1863, as the raid was being planned, he wrote to another officer that I'm paraphrasing now, but he said something like, "We know that the primary source of information to the enemy is our Negroes," is the way he put it. And at that time, the use of the word Negroes meant slaves. I mean, that was his way of not using this word. For his own reasons and in his own self-interest. But so it's interesting. So we know that African-American slaves were the people who were giving information to the Union side. We also know that they had to have information to get up that river. On the banks of the river, when the raid was going on, first of all, one of the planters noticed that there was women or a woman on the top deck of the flagship. Okay. This other planter also noticed that the ships were angling around the torpedoes, which were the underwater mines that were fixed to the bottom of the river. And so the planter would have known where they were, because they had to get up and down that river all the time. But the Union gunships, if they were angling around an unseen object, something they didn't know where it was, it had to have been because they had that intelligence. So one of the people whose records I looked at was a man named Walter Plowden. And this is an interesting point of corroboration because Harriet Tubman, in her own application for a military pension, she listed 7 or 8 scouts by name that she had recruited and worked with. One of them was a man named Walter Plowden. Separately, and there was no indication that they stayed in touch after the war. Separately, a couple years later, he applies for a pension from the U.S. Congress as well as a scout. Now, he doesn't mention Harriet Tubman by name. Wouldn't that be nice? But he doesn't mention anybody by name. Right. Because it's his pension application. And he's probably not going to say, oh, and I was led by a woman. That just kind of maybe doesn't go over so well for a guy. But he says, I made multiple raids up the Combahee and all the surrounding rivers. And so again, and he's given a pension by the Union or by the United States Congress. And so I think we know there were scouts. That's the only way that these 2 gunships could have penetrated 25 miles inland with an army of 2,000 Confederates camped 10 miles away, get all the way upriver, burn 4 plantations, free 756 people, and get away without a scratch. It is the perfect mission. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And that does not happen in warfare of the intense character of the American Civil War without good leadership, without good intelligence. I think. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely correct. Did you learn anything about the Webster trial that took place right after the Combahee River raid? And did you glean anything from that you used in your book? When she testified about that Webster trial, and we have some documents when she stated where she lives. Dr. Cobbs have written a riveting book that she entitles The Tubman Command. It is actually the first book written about Harriet Tubman that describes the Combahee River raid. We are excited about Dr. Cobbs' new book, and Dr. Cobbs will be coming to Beaufort, South Carolina on May 18th to do a presentation on the Tubman Command, and she will also be doing a book signing. This event is sponsored by the Tabernacle Baptist Church and the Harriet Tubman Monument. We are in the process of building a monument to place it in Beaufort that depicts Harriet's role in the Combahee River raid. This is truly an exciting time. We look forward to Dr. Cobbs coming to Beaufort, and we hope that those of you who are listening now will text us. Let us know, give us your comments, and we want you to continue to follow us on Facebook. And we hope that you will be a part of the Harriet Tubman Monument. And we ask that you make a contribution to the Harriet Tubman Monument as well. Dr. Cobbs, we are so glad that you're with us. One other thing I was just saying and bringing our audience up to speed. Tell us a little about Harriet Tubman's faith and how her faith played into her involvement in Beaufort and specifically in her raids.
Yeah. Well, Harriet Tubman was a person of extraordinary faith in God. And I had to think a lot about that as I was thinking about this book. She's also not portrayed necessarily as a person who's going to church every other minute. She's got a lot on her plate. So she carries God with her. And it's I think it's a very personal kind of faith and very powerful. And I think that power is really necessary. I mean, it's sort of, you always hear about, people on their deathbeds are praying hard. Right? And she's a person who prayed hard all the time and was, I think, felt very intimate, with her Lord. And so that was a very interesting thing to portray, a person who's not like churchy, who's a daring woman, and yet at the same time, a woman of extraordinary faith.
Dr. Cobbs, your timing could not have been better. At the present time, we know that there is a movie coming out on Harriet Tubman. We know that we are putting the monument of Harriet Tubman in Beaufort. We also know that Harriet Tubman should be on the $20 bill. but above all, your book comes out to give a real picture of Harriet Tubman and her involvement in the Civil War. What do you want your readers to take away from the Tubman Command?
Well, I'm in with you, completely in sync, that this is a person who should be on our currency. One of the reasons for writing it is to help people understand her full historical accomplishment. And I truly believe, having written many books on American history, that she is our single most, patriotic heroine in American history. She is that person from any objective measure. And so I hope everyone else will take that away, as I did.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to you coming and sharing with us in Beaufort. Is there anything else that you would like to share with those who are listening in right now to encourage them to get the book, and also to appear at some of the events that you will be appearing at, specifically in Beaufort, but in other places as well?
Yes, I'll be in Charleston, and I'll be in Decatur in Georgia, and I'll be in Winston-Salem. But of course, most importantly, in Beaufort in a few weekends, May 17th and 18th, I think, are our dates. And, I hope anyone who's in town will come celebrate Harriet Tubman with me. And we'll get a chance to really honor her accomplishments together.
And the unique thing is that even though you will be in many other locations, this is where the book is set at, in Beaufort, South Carolina. There's so much emphasis being placed on the Reconstruction era. And we do know that Harriet Tubman came in prior to Reconstruction, time what we refer to as the rehearsal for Reconstruction. And she made tremendous contributions while she was here. Your timing could not have been better. And certainly we look forward to having you here with us in Beaufort.
Well, thank you. I look forward to walking those streets again. It's like a sacred way.
Well, great. We want to thank all of you for tuning in, and please let us know, give us your comments, and follow us on Facebook, and please contribute to the Harriet Tubman Monument. We are bringing Harriet back to Beaufort. We certainly excited about Dr. Cobbs being here next Saturday from 3 to 5. And we will also be having a fundraiser on the 17th to benefit the Harriet Tubman Monument. Please contribute, make it happen. We want to bring Harriet Tubman back to Beaufort. Again, we want to thank you, Dr. Cobbs.
Thank you, Reverend. I'll see you soon.
See you on the 18th.
All right. Bye-bye.